If every episode received the same treatment as this one, perfect wouldn't even begin to describe this adaptation. I'm not just referring to the stellar animation that brought this fight to life, but also the pacing, tone, and anime original changes that enhanced it. In the manga and novel, the Ant King has a skill allowing him to obtain powers from those he consumes, yet he doesn't use them. He has over 5 S-rank abilities in his stomach, but for some reason he doesn't utilize any of them. Seeing the Ant King use these ice powers in the anime is a welcome change. It shows that the Ant King is constantly evolving in a way that perfectly suits him. This change allowed the fight to become more balanced, unlike in the novel and manga, where it was a one-sided defeat. The episode's biggest changes occur in how the fight is portrayed, largely through the perspectives of others. This is an interesting way to show what Sung is thinking about his growth in strength. If you want to see how this climactic fight differed across all 3 mediums, stay tuned as we'll explore it in detail. This episode covers chapters 101, 104 from the manhwa, and chapters 118, 121 from the web novel. Let's begin at the TV station. Unlike in the anime, where the feed disconnected due to a connection issue, the broadcast was actually cut off by the director himself. The scene was too damaging to show the country's strongest hunters being destroyed by a single ant. He refused to broadcast Ma's torture and Min's subsequent death. This was when he believed everything was over, until someone reported another figure appearing on the scene. The director thought the only person who could save him was Jesus, but what he saw on screen was close enough. No one could identify who this person was or what they were capable of, but their confident presence was enough for the director to take a gamble on them. There was a chance this person might not even be a hunter, but now the director was determined to see this broadcast through. Asterisk rewind to before Sung's arrival asterisk. The story rewinds to a moment before Sung arrives, where an emotional perspective is given from the cameraman. Despite being backed into a corner, he had no regrets, knowing this was his chance to go out in a blaze of glory. He didn't consider himself a true hero like the S-ranks fighting in front of him, but he was intent on supporting them. Before, his life was filled with menial jobs meant to slowly advance his career, but now he was part of something he never thought he'd experience. His role as a hunter, though not one he was fond of, allowed him to capture footage no other cameraman on Earth had. He was proud to have shown the world his country's hunters defeating the boss of an S-rank gate. However, he felt regretful about not being able to say goodbye to his father. His last words were mundane, and he wished they could have talked longer. Time was ruthless, and regret always came too late. With no energy left to activate his tank skills, the cameraman apologized to his dad and accepted his fate. Asterisk the cameraman's rescue, asterisk. What happened next was incomprehensible. In one moment he was being saved by a shadowy figure, and the next, a person he'd never seen before was forcing him to drink something. Seconds later, he was fully healed. And that's when the cameraman realized this could be the person he thought it was. It was a perplexing turn of events that would shock anyone. Sung didn't arrive sooner because the broadcast he was watching was delayed. By the time he realized it was 10 minutes behind, the damage to Korea's S-ranks had already been done. Luckily, he was able to save the weakest person present first. Sung's actions afterward were crucial, as he needed a way to clear the ants without harming those they were attacking. The easiest way would have been to use Tusk, but there was no guarantee such an attack wouldn't hit the others too. So, he decided to use Iron, employing his taunt skill to divert the ants' focus immediately. Sung praised Iron for a job well done and summoned the rest of his soldiers to eliminate as many ants as possible. Given that Beck now had an opening, he moved his teammates to the safest corner he could find and finally took in what was happening. Ma, who had his eyes injured in the fight before, could only ask what Bayek was seeing. Beck replied that everything was okay now, which was more for his own reassurance since he had fully believed he was going to die just moments ago. Beck's relief and Sung's display asterisk. Beck had even subconsciously called out for help the moment Sung made his entrance. Seeing Sung easily handle the ants that had given them so much trouble provided Beck with a huge sense of relief. His hope of survival was now fully rekindled. As far as he was concerned, Sung's aid was far more reliable than the combined power of over 20 Japanese S-rank. Beck turned to the cameraman and told him to keep the camera locked on Sung. As someone who had witnessed Sung's power more than once, Beck understood that the entire nation would want to see the spectacle about to unfold. Having only heard stories about Sung through others, Beck now sat in eager anticipation. This time, he would finally see that power with his own eyes. Though the S-rank hunters had finished their job, the cameraman's work had only just begun. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Sung had already taken out nearly half the ants. He'd killed so many he lost count. The process was so effortless that he remained entirely unbothered by the swarm. Compared to the enemies he faced in the demon castle, these ants were, quite literally, just ants. Then he decided to speed things up. With no hesitation and no care for the audience watching, Sung began resurrecting the fallen ants. Unlike the anime, which skipped over this entirely, he wasted no time in adding new soldiers to his shadow army. He didn't even try to hide it. The whole world watched as his shadow extraction ability came to light. No one fully understood what it was, but one thing was certain. It was no longer a secret. The cameraman was the first to be shaken. Watching shadowy creatures claw their way out of the ground was far beyond anything he could comprehend. Beck, on the other hand, remained calm. Still, this was his first time seeing Sung's summons, and he was caught in a quiet awe. Soon, the shadows outnumbered the living. Sung's army of darkness began pushing the ants back, giving viewers everywhere a glimmer of hope. It was a stark contrast to the despair they'd felt just moments before. The last thing they'd seen was the Ant King tearing through their hunters. What followed now felt like an emotional roller coaster. Victory when the queen fell, fear when the king appeared, devastation with Min's confirmed death, and now hope again. As Sung's massacre continued, the emotions shifted. Some were ecstatic at this sudden turn of events, while others, those who had lost loved ones, were moved to tears. Revenge felt closer than ever. No one knew who this mysterious hunter was. But they all knew one thing: they were rooting for him. That excitement only intensified when they discovered he was Korean. For the TV director, who had been under immense pressure, this was a moment of pure relief. His gamble had paid off. Min's death had felt like the end of the world. But Sung's arrival had changed everything. There was now a light at the end of the tunnel. The only thing left was for the remaining hunters to make it to extraction. As for the Japanese team that had already withdrawn, any agreements made with them were now meaningless. The loot would no longer be shared. If Korea wanted, they had every right to demand reparations. Things were clearly not going the way Japan had hoped. Matsumoto thought he had prepared for every possible scenario, but somehow, one single individual had turned everything on its head. He was stunned. And to make matters worse, his team couldn't even track this monster anymore. The same satellite that had detected the Queen's energy now failed to locate a being far more powerful. They could track it when it fought Goto, but now the brilliant light it once gave off was completely gone. No trace of power could be found anywhere. At first, this anomaly made no sense, until Matsumoto realized the truth. This monster had complete control over its magical energy. It could turn it off and on at will. That's how it remained hidden before the raid, and it's why Goto lost. Japan had placed too much faith in satellite data and never considered anything outside of that. They hadn't anticipated a being that could suppress its own existence. Matsumoto called it the perfect failure, and it would cost them dearly. He fully expected the situation to get worse. It was only a matter of time before this monster reached the mainland. And with no hunter strong enough to stop it,
The potential devastation was terrifying. Then they relocated the beam. It had returned to the Queen's chamber and was no longer hiding its energy. Matsumoto assumed it was fighting the Korean team now. If all went well, they'd be eliminated too. But then another light appeared, brighter and surrounded by hundreds of smaller lights. Some were so powerful they registered on their own. It was a breathtaking and unprecedented phenomenon. Matsumoto demanded the Korean broadcast be shown. What he saw confirmed their worst fears. That immense light was coming from one person. No one could believe it. This lone hunter was producing it all.
Chairman Go reacted just as we saw. But if you're wondering why he wasn't in the mission control room earlier, it's because his heart wouldn't have been able to handle it. Just seeing Sung on screen nearly gave him a heart attack. That's why we see his personal doctor standing by in the manhwa. Watching Sung extract shadows only made things worse. It confirmed that Sung had hidden the truth from him. But none of that mattered now. The only thing Go wanted was to understand why Sung didn't want to join the fight earlier. It was obvious Sung was excited to be there. For someone who claimed to only want to fight monsters, why had he walked away from the chance to fight the strongest? Back home, the reaction was different. Sung hadn't been brooding on a rooftop like in the anime. He was actually at home, watching the raid with his mother. It made more sense and showed why he wasn't there from the start. He really was spending time with family. When things started to go south, he left the room and likely shut off the TV to prevent his mum from seeing who he really was. Unlike in the anime, in the manhwa and novel, his identity as a hunter was still a secret from her. He didn't want to burden her the way their father had. Back at the raid, the priority was saving Cha. That meant extraction was everything. But before they could move, the Ant King appeared again, plunging everyone watching back into despair. The last time they saw him, he had decimated their hunters. Now they feared it was happening again. After the Ant King took Cha out with a single blow, no one believed a ranged mage like Sung would fare any better. Beck was ready to jump in, but Sung told everyone to stand down. He said the fight would go faster if they didn't interfere. It wasn't a decision everyone supported, but they respected it, especially after seeing what he'd done to the swarm. Beck had only offered to help because he assumed Sung would be low on mana. Using so many summons must have taken a toll, right? What confused Sung, however, was the concern itself. His soldiers cost no mana to maintain. As mentioned before, Sung only used magical energy to regenerate them, so his reserves were rarely an issue, but no one else knew that, and he didn't plan on sharing. All he said was that his summons didn't use as much mana as they thought. That alone was enough to shock everyone. If there was no mana cost, what weakness could he possibly have? No one had an answer. Sung immediately recognized the Ant King, and the Ant King recognized him. Two powerful beings. The king's observation of Sung mirrored Goto's from before. And then came the showdown. As Sung approached, people watching were sure the outcome was set. The Ant King had ragdolled Korea's strongest tank, and yet here was Sung walking straight up to it. The Ant King swung, aiming to end the fight in one hit, but Sung took the punch to the face and didn't even flinch. The world stopped. Viewers everywhere were frozen, trying to process what they had just seen. Then Sung's counterpunch landed and the Ant King was blown away. A stunned silence followed until cheers erupted across the globe. The king had expected to knock Sung back at the very least, but Sung didn't budge. Instead, he launched into a barrage of powerful strikes. Each impact shook the tunnel itself. The cameraman, still recording, was overwhelmed. After seeing the Ant King obliterate 6 S-ranks, he never imagined witnessing someone even stronger. The gap was unimaginable. When Sung realized his punches weren't doing enough damage, he decided brute force was the answer. He would punch through the armor.
The resulting clash was a whirlwind of shockwaves, the energy alone enough to make people nearby sick. The cameraman, hit hardest, still managed to hold steady. He even smiled, knowing he was capturing his nation's hope. As for the Ant King, its body, tougher than any known metal, was now cracking, and though it lacked pain receptors to feel it, the damage was undeniable. It was only a matter of time now.
Sung JINWOO wasn't naive enough to let an opening like that go to waste. The moment he noticed the Ant King was distracted, he struck. A direct hit to the face that made one thing perfectly clear. Beating JINWOO in a contest of strength just wasn't going to happen. The Ant King, to its credit, knew it had other options. That's when it turned to one of its more sinister tools, the paralysis poison, a skill it developed through gluttony. Just like we saw, it managed to land the hit, but that only led to another brutal counterpunch. And this time, it actually hurt. For the first time in the fight, the Ant King felt pain. That moment of pain triggered something else too. JINWOO picked up on it. Not just the damage, but the Ant King's emotions. This wasn't new for him. Back during the High Orc raid, he'd noticed he could read opponents. Though at the time, he thought it was just from watching their expressions. But now, fighting a creature with no face, no visible tells, and still sensing its emotions? That's when it clicked. This wasn't just instinct. It was a new perception, maybe even a new ability, and it changed everything. Now, JINWOO wasn't just reacting to the Ant King. He was predicting it. He could track it even when it vanished from sight. Where the Ant King relied on speed to disorient its enemies, JINWOO could follow its emotional signature, sensing shifts in intent, like when its anxiety turned to confidence. That was all JINWOO needed to know its strategy had changed. The Ant King hadn't used its full speed at first because it wanted to assert dominance, to flaunt its royal strength. But once that failed, it knew it was time to stop showing off. Too bad for it, because a battle of speed is exactly where JINWOO shines. Even though the Ant King kicked things up a notch, JINWOO matched it effortlessly, as if the fight had just started. He kept pace, pushing the Ant King onto the defensive. And the more it retreated, the more confident JINWOO became. He could feel the Ant King's doubt, the panic setting in. Classic JINWOO, feeding off that momentum. Then came the signature moment, that self-assured grin, the internal praise, the recognition of just how far he'd come, right before he went in for the finish. The Ant King's exoskeleton was already crumbling. JINWOO unleashed a barrage of critical strikes, one after another, until the skill itself evolved. The sheer brutality of his attacks unlocked a new ability mid-fight. Mutilate. It was Mutilate that finally triggered the Ant King's survival instincts, making it take to the skies in a desperate attempt to escape, just like we saw in the anime. But what it didn't expect was the sight of a human flying after it. This wasn't speed. This was Ruler's touch, JINWOO's telekinetic power lifting him through the air like a god. No sprinting, no jumping, just raw, magical dominance. The Ant King tried to make one last play, but it was too late. Even in numbers, it didn't stand a chance. Every advantage it thought it had was stripped away instantly. JINWOO's shadow swarmed in, tearing through the Ant army. Even Tusk got involved, though JINWOO gave him a very specific warning. Don't let any of those attacks hit the humans, or I'll never summon you again. That's how serious he was. And now, at the end of it all, the only thing the Ant King could feel was terror. Not the fear of death, something deeper. Existential dread. It realized in those final moments that it was completely outmatched, created for one purpose, to destroy the strongest humans. And yet here it was. Helpless, broken, and defeated. While the Ant King drowned in despair, JINWOO, he was already thinking about turning it into a soldier. But first, he needed to make sure it was dead. With one last strike, he finished the job, commenting how the Ant King finally looked like what it always was. Just another insect,